Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Welcome to another story on Glisso. Today, we explore a situation many of us have faced. The moment a relationship feels over, but then something unexpected happens. Imagine you are ready to say goodbye. You have the words prepared. You are ready for a fresh start. But then, the person you are about to break up with hands you a beautiful, expensive gift. Now you feel trapped. Is it a gift or is it a bribe? In this story, The Gilded Anchor, we will follow Elena as she navigates the guilt, the pressure, and the difficult conversation that follows. This is a perfect lesson for learning how to express complicated emotions and set boundaries in English. As always, we have divided this story into 10 chapters. Stick around until the end for our quiz section to test your vocabulary on idioms like strings attached and the cold shoulder. Let's begin Chapter 1, The Cold Shoulder.
The winter air was sharp, but the atmosphere inside the small apartment felt even colder. Elena sat at the wooden dining table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since lost its heat. She watched the steam disappear into the gray light of the afternoon, feeling a heavy silence settling over the room. Across from her, Liam was humming a cheerful tune while he scrolled through his phone, completely unaware of the storm brewing in her mind. For months, Elena had felt the distance between them growing like a physical wall. They still shared a home, they still shared meals, but they no longer shared a life. Every conversation felt scripted, every smile felt like a polite mask she was forced to wear. She had rehearsed the words 1,000 times in her head. "Liam, we need to talk." But every time she opened her mouth, the courage vanished, replaced by a wave of guilt. He wasn't a bad person, but they had simply become two different people who no longer fit together. She looked at the way he laughed at a video on his screen, and she felt a pang of sadness. She didn't want to hurt him, but staying felt like a slow betrayal of herself. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the seconds of a relationship that was running out of time. Elena took a deep breath, her heart racing against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was tired of going through the motions and pretending that everything was fine. Today was the day she would finally be honest. She would tell him that her heart wasn't in it anymore. She cleared her throat, ready to break the silence that had become her prison. "Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly in the quiet room. He looked up with a bright, genuine smile that made her stomach sink. "Wait, Elena, before you say anything, I have a surprise for you," he said, reaching into his bag. The words she had prepared died in her throat as he pulled out a small velvet box. The small velvet box sat on the wooden table between them like a heavy weight. Elena felt the air leave her lungs as Liam pushed the box closer to her. She had been seconds away from ending their relationship, but the world had suddenly shifted. Liam's eyes were bright with an excitement she hadn't seen in months. "Go on," he urged, his voice soft and filled with a strange, nervous energy. "Open it." Elena's fingers trembled as she reached for the lid, her heart sinking with every inch it moved. She didn't want a gift, she wanted a clean break and a chance to breathe again. The lid clicked open, revealing a vintage, diamond-encrusted watch resting on a silk cushion. It was breathtaking, a delicate piece of history that sparkled even in the dim afternoon light. Elena recognized it immediately from the old photographs in Liam's aunt album. "Is this your grandmother's watch?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Liam nodded, a proud smile spreading across his face as he leaned forward. "It's been in my family for 3 generations," he explained, his eyes locking onto hers. "I had it professionally restored last month because I wanted it to be perfect for you."
Elena felt a wave of nausea wash over her instead of the joy he clearly expected. This wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of a future she no longer wanted. By giving her a family heirloom, Liam wasn't just giving a gift, he was anchoring her to his history. She looked at the diamonds and saw only a glittering cage that was locking her in place. "Liam, I can't. This is too much," she stammered, trying to find a way to refuse. He reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and firm, blocking her escape. "Nothing is too much for my forever," he said, his words hitting her like a physical blow. Elena looked down at the watch and realized that the truth was now buried under layers of gold.
The watch sat on Elena's wrist, feeling heavier than any piece of jewelry should. Liam had insisted on fastening the clasp himself, his fingers lingering on her skin. She stared at the shimmering face of the watch, but she didn't see the time. All she saw was a debt that she could never possibly repay. "It looks perfect on you," Liam said, his voice filled with a satisfied warmth. Elena tried to smile, but her facial muscles felt stiff and unresponsive. She felt like an actress on a stage, playing a role in a play that should have ended weeks ago. Every time the diamonds caught the light, they seemed to mock her silence. How could she say, "I'm leaving," while wearing his family's most precious heirloom? She walked to the kitchen to start dinner, her movements slow and robotic. The clinking of the metal against the countertop sounded like a judge's gavel. She realized that by accepting the gift, she had accidentally accepted a new contract. Liam followed her into the kitchen, humming that same cheerful tune from earlier. He seemed lighter, happier, as if the watch had solved all their problems. But for Elena, the air in the apartment had become thick and difficult to breathe. She felt a sudden urge to rip the watch off and hand it back immediately. Yet the thought of the look on his face stopped her cold in her tracks. She was trapped in a golden cage built from kindness and expensive vintage parts. The weight of the gold was dragging her back into a life she had already left in her mind. She realized that the longer she wore it, the harder the truth would be to tell. Dinner was served in a silence that felt more like a negotiation than a meal. Elena kept her left hand beneath the table, trying to hide the brilliance of the watch. Liam, however, was eager to talk about the future for the first time in months. "I was thinking we could take a trip this summer," he said, tapping his fork against his plate. "Maybe to the coast, since you now have a piece of family history to wear to dinner." Elena felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the true purpose of the gift. It wasn't just a gesture of love, it was a hook designed to pull her back into his plans. "Liam, about the watch, it's beautiful, but it feels like a lot of responsibility," she started. He waved his hand dismissively, but his eyes remained sharp and focused on her. "It's not a responsibility, Elena. It's a commitment to us and where we are going." She saw then that the gift had strings attached, invisible threads pulling her toward him. Every mention of the watch was followed by a request or a plan for the coming year. He was using the heirloom to buy her loyalty and to silence her growing doubts. Elena realized that Liam wasn't oblivious to their problems, he was simply trying to outbid them. He thought that if the gift was expensive enough, the problems would simply disappear. But feelings cannot be bought, and the strings were starting to feel like tight knots. She looked at him and saw a man trying to control the ending of a story he couldn't write. The watch felt tighter on her wrist now, as if the metal were shrinking with every word he spoke. She wasn't a partner anymore, she was a curator of his family's expectations. She knew she had to cut the strings before they strangled her completely. Elena sat in a crowded cafe, the noise of clinking spoons and loud chatter surrounding her.
Across the table, her friend Sarah was staring at Elena's wrist with wide eyes. "Is that real diamonds?" Sarah whispered, leaning in closer to inspect the watch. Elena nodded slowly, feeling more like a museum exhibit than a friend. "It's a family heirloom," Elena explained, her voice flat and devoid of any excitement. "Liam gave it to me yesterday, just as I was about to tell him I wanted to leave." Sarah sat back, a look of genuine shock crossing her face as she processed the timing. "Wow, that is some heavy-duty timing," Sarah said, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "If you keep it, you're telling him you're staying for the long haul." Elena sighed, tracing the edge of the leather watch strap with her thumb. "I feel like a thief if I keep it, but I feel like a monster if I return it now." Sarah leaned forward again, her expression turning serious and more focused. "Elena, a gift shouldn't be a prison sentence for your heart. If you don't love him, the price of the watch doesn't change that fact. But returning it, that's going to be a very messy conversation," warned Sarah. Elena looked out the window, watching the rain start to streak against the glass. She knew her friend was right, but the guilt was still heavy in her chest. "I feel like I'm wearing his family's expectations on my arm," Elena admitted. "Then you have to take it off," Sarah said firmly, taking Elena's hand. "The longer you wait, the more dishonest this whole situation becomes."
The walk home from the cafe felt longer than usual as the rain began to pour. Elena stepped into the apartment, hoping for a moment of quiet to process Sarah's advice. Instead, she found Liam in the living room, surrounded by old photo albums. "Look at this, Elena," he said, pointing to a grainy black-and-white photograph. "That is my grandmother wearing the watch on her wedding day in 1950. Elena felt a sharp pang in her chest as she looked at the smiling woman in the photo. "She was so happy," Liam continued, his voice thick with a forced kind of nostalgia. "I told my mother today that I finally gave it to the woman I want to marry." The words hit Elena like a physical weight, making it hard for her to even stand straight. He was intentionally building a wall of guilt around her, brick by emotional brick. "Liam, we really need to talk about everything," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He immediately stood up and walked over, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Is this about the stress? I know, the watch is a big step for us," he interrupted. "But think of how much it means to my family that you are the one holding it now." Elena realized he was using his family history as a shield to protect himself from the truth. Every time she tried to lead the conversation toward a breakup, he mentioned the sacrifice. He talked about the cost of the restoration and the emotional value of the heirloom. It was a classic guilt trip designed to make her feel ungrateful for wanting her freedom. She felt like a villain in a story he was writing simply because she wanted to be honest. The watch felt colder against her skin now, a frozen reminder of a promise she never made. The following evening, Liam insisted they attend a small dinner party with his colleagues. Elena tried to hide the watch under the sleeve of her silk blouse, but it was impossible. The diamonds caught the light of the chandelier, drawing every eye in the crowded room. "Oh, Elena, is that the heirloom Liam mentioned?" a woman asked, leaning in close. Everyone gathered around to admire the vintage gold and the intricate hand-carved detail. Elena felt a wave of heat rise to her face as she forced a polite, empty smile. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Liam said, placing a possessive hand on her lower back. "It belonged to my grandmother, and I wanted Elena to be the one to carry on the tradition." The guests offered a chorus of "Ah" and "How romantic," but Elena felt like she was suffocating. She wasn't a person anymore. She was a display case for Liam's family pride. Every compliment felt like a lie she was telling to the entire room. A colleague joked about a wedding date, and the room erupted in light-hearted laughter. Liam laughed along, but Elena's heart felt like it was made of lead. She looked at the watch and realized she couldn't wear the truth on her wrist another minute. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice cracking as she pulled away from the group. She hurried toward the balcony, the cool night air hitting her face like a splash of water. The laughter from inside sounded hollow and distant, like a recording of a happy life. She gripped the cold metal railing, her knuckles turning white under the pressure. The breaking point had finally arrived. The weight of the lie had become too heavy to carry. She realized that being nice was actually the cruelest thing she could do to both of them.
The drive home from the party was silent, the only sound being the rhythmic clicking of the turn signal. Elena waited until they were inside the apartment, the door clicking shut with a finality that made her shiver. Liam began to loosen his tie, a satisfied smirk still lingering on his face from the evening's attention. "That went well, didn't it?" he asked, not noticing that Elena hadn't even taken off her coat. "Everyone loved the watch, Elena. They can see how much I truly value you." Elena didn't answer. Instead, she slowly unfastened the clasp of the vintage watch. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was finally clear of the fog of guilt. She walked over to the dining table and placed the watch back into its velvet-lined box. "Liam, we need to stop this," she said, her voice steady and quiet in the large room. He turned around, his smile faltering as he saw the open box on the table. "What are you doing? Is there something wrong with the clasp?" he asked, stepping toward her. "There is something wrong with us, Liam, and this gift doesn't change that," Elena replied. "I cannot accept this because I cannot give you the forever you are asking for." She pushed the box across the wooden surface, the velvet sliding smoothly toward him. Liam stared at the box as if it were a dangerous animal, his face turning a pale, sickly gray. "You're returning it after everything I did to get it ready for you?" he hissed. "I'm returning it because it belongs to your family, and I am no longer a part of your future." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the unspoken words of 1,000 failed arguments. Elena felt a sudden sharp relief as the physical weight left her wrist for the last time. She had finally returned the favor of honesty, even if it was the hardest gift to give.
The silence in the apartment was broken by the sound of Liam's harsh, ragged breathing. He stared at the velvet box on the table as if it were an insult rather than a returned treasure. Elena watched as his face twisted from shock into a dark, cold anger that she hadn't seen before. "You think you can just hand this back and walk away like it's nothing?" he spat. "Do you have any idea how much this watch is worth? How much my family sacrificed?" Elena realized then that he wasn't mourning the loss of their love. He was mourning the loss of his leverage. The gift had been a gamble, a final attempt to buy her presence, and he had lost the bet. "It's precisely because it is worth so much that I am returning it, Liam," she said softly. "I'm not walking away like it's nothing, but I'm walking away while I still have my integrity." Liam grabbed the box and shoved it into a drawer, the wood slamming shut with a violent crack. He didn't try to hug her or ask her to stay. He simply turned his back to her. "Fine," he muttered, his voice hollow and distant. "Just leave, take your things and go."
Elena felt a strange mix of deep sadness and incredible lightness as she walked toward the bedroom. The social fallout would be difficult. There would be rumors and questions from his family. She knew she would be the villain in his version of the story for a very long time. But as she packed her bags, she realized she was finally breathing air that wasn't heavy with lies. The aftermath of the breakup was messy, but it was the first honest thing they had shared in months. She walked out the front door, the weight on her wrist replaced by the freedom of her own hands.
A few weeks later, Elena sat on a park bench, watching the golden leaves dance in the wind. The air was crisp and fresh, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly light. She looked down at her bare wrist, where the heavy vintage watch used to sit. There was a pale mark where the strap had been, a faint reminder of a past life. But as the days passed, even that mark was beginning to fade away into her skin. She had moved into a small, sunlit studio apartment that felt entirely her own. There were no family heirlooms on the shelves, only books she loved and plants she had bought. She thought about Liam occasionally, wondering if he had given the watch back to his mother. She hoped he had, and she hoped he would one day find someone who truly wanted to wear it. The social fallout had been difficult, just as Sarah had warned her it would be. Some people didn't understand why she would walk away from such a generous man. But Elena didn't feel the need to explain her heart to people who only saw the price tag. She had learned that the most expensive things in life are often the ones that cost us our peace. She pulled a notebook from her bag and began to write down her goals for the new year. She wanted to travel, to learn a new language, and to live a life that felt authentic. The gilded anchor was gone, and she was no longer being pulled down by someone else's expectations. She was the captain of her own ship now, sailing toward a horizon that was wide and bright. Elena took a deep breath of the cold autumn air and smiled at the quiet beauty of the park. The most valuable gift she had ever received wasn't made of gold or diamonds. It was the simple, priceless freedom to start over with a clean slate. The weight of a gift is rarely found in its price tag. For Elena, the diamond watch was never truly a piece of jewelry. It was a gilded anchor designed to keep her from drifting away. By choosing the difficult path of honesty over the comfortable path of luxury, she finally understood that some treasures are too expensive to keep. The most valuable thing she walked away with that day wasn't made of gold or diamonds. It was her own integrity and the quiet, priceless freedom of a clean slate. The gilded anchor shows us that sometimes the most expensive gifts come with the heaviest strings attached. Elena's journey reminds us that honesty is more valuable than any family heirloom, even when the conversation is difficult to start. What would you do if you were in Elena's position? Tell me in the comments if you have ever gone through a situation where a gift felt like a burden. Would you have returned the watch immediately, or would you have waited for a better time to talk? I would love to hear your thoughts and see how you use today's new vocabulary in your response. Now, let's see how much you remember from today's lesson. It is time for our quiz section. You will see the quiz below the description box. Solve it and write your score in the comments. Thank you for joining us for this story on Glisso. If you enjoyed the story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories. See you in the next story. Goodbye.